He came to tear it all down, a millionaire CEO with a demolition order in his hand, and zero intention of looking back. The building was condemned, forgotten, and full of ghosts from someone else's past. But then 5 children stepped out of the shadows. No shoes, no coats, only one flashlight between them. And the oldest one looked up at him and asked, "Are you here to take us away?" 2. That moment stopped everything. But who were these kids? Why were they living alone in a place that should have been bulldozed weeks ago? And what kind of man does it take to walk away from $1 billion project to save 5 strangers? As he looked into their eyes, something inside him shifted. Not pity, not guilt, but recognition. What happens next isn't just a story about saving lives. It's a story about being saved in return. So get ready, because this journey will test everything you think you know about family, sacrifice, and the quiet power of choosing to stay. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin. The morning light rose like gold spilling across the skyline. It slid through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 38th floor office warm, expansive, too quiet. Roman Hale didn't look up. He stood at the far end of the room, coffee untouched, reviewing digital schematics on a sleek glass screen. Every inch of his office was designed for precision dark walnut finishes, low ambient lighting, custom-built everything. There was no clutter, no distraction, just control. Outside, the city below pulsed sirens, scaffolds, honking horns. But in here, nothing stirred unless Roman allowed it. He glanced at his calendar. 9:15 a.m. Today was demolition day. The last structure in Old Briarwood was scheduled to come down at noon. The building was part of a forgotten row of brick tenements, the last remnant of a neighborhood long since eaten by steel and glass. His company, Hale Dominion Developments, had spent years buying out the area, parcel by parcel. Soon, the old would be erased. And in its place, the Hale Center, a luxury tech campus with zero carbon footprint, rooftop gardens, and a design award practically guaranteed. Roman's eyes flicked over the final site map. All boxes checked, permits signed, contractors briefed, clearances approved, then a knock, 3 soft raps. He turned slowly. His assistant, a wiry man named Cole, stepped in holding his phone, his brow furrowed tight. "They need you on the line," Cole said. "It's the Briarwood team." Roman's jaw tensed just a fraction. "What kind of problem?" he asked, already annoyed. Cole hesitated. "There are people at the site." Roman exhaled sharply. "We've cleared every unit." "I know, sir. But the crew says 5 kids are standing in front of the building, and they won't move." A pause. Roman narrowed his eyes. "Children, yes. No parents in sight. They're refusing to leave." He stared at Cole a moment longer, then held out his hand. The phone dropped into his palm. "This is Hale. Mr. Hale, sir, it's Marty down at Briarwood," came the voice from the other end, laced with nerves. "We're all set to go. But the kids, they just showed up. They're standing right in front of the steps. The demo crew won't move with them there." Roman's voice was low, controlled. "Where did they come from?" "We're not sure. The place was supposed to be empty, but they're saying they've lived there all along." Silence stretched across the line. Roman's hand drifted from his hip to the window, fingertips tapping the glass. "I'll come down." "Sir," the foreman stammered. Roman hung up. Cole blinked. "You're going. Yourself." Roman Hale had not personally visited a job site in over a year. He left ribbon cuttings to the publicist, site visits to the engineers, community meetings to legal. But something about the voice on that call, something about the words 5 kids and they won't move, left him with a feeling he didn't recognize. It wasn't irritation. It wasn't urgency. It was wait, as if something real was happening. And for once, it wasn't on a spreadsheet. He grabbed his coat. Hold my meetings. Clear the afternoon. 35 minutes later, a black sedan eased up to the curb in front of the condemned property. Roman stepped out into the crumbling morning. Old Briarwood was a shell of itself, weeds splitting the sidewalks, boards nailed across windows, rusted iron fences sagging under years of disrepair. Towering above the ruin were the new developments, glass giants stretching skyward like trees in a forest too expensive to name. But this building, it remained. Crooked, brickwork faded, scaffolding wrapped around its frame like a skeleton's grip, and in front of the cracked cement steps, 5 children stood. They didn't look up as he approached. 2 boys, the older maybe 11, the younger around 9, and 3 identical girls, no more than 5 years old, their blonde curls tangled and their small hands clasped tightly. They weren't crying, they weren't yelling, they were just standing, as if the weight of the world hadn't crushed them yet. But it was close. Roman stopped several feet away, the soles of his black shoes crunching over broken glass. He looked at them, and for a long moment, said nothing. Then, calmly, "You can't stay here. This building is coming down today." The older boy took a step forward. His voice didn't waver. "Sir, we don't have anywhere else to go." And just like that Roman Hale, a man who built towers that pierced clouds, felt something fracture inside his chest. Roman Hale didn't move at first. He simply stood, watching 5 pairs of eyes look back at him, guarded, wide, and far too steady for children that age. Behind them, the old house groaned in the wind. The scaffolding creaked. A bird flitted from a broken window, scattering dust. Still, the children didn't flinch. Roman's voice was calm, as always, too calm. "This building is condemned." The older boy replied again, not with defiance, but with something sharper. "Reality. We know," he said, "but we've lived here since Christmas." Roman's brow furrowed. "That's impossible," he said. "The building was scheduled for demolition months ago. Everyone was relocated. There were payouts. Every unit." The boy cut in quietly. "Our dad took the money and left." Roman blinked. "Our mom's in the hospital," the boy continued. "She's been there for weeks." A long silence followed. Roman's eyes swept the street. No adults, no signs of oversight. Just 5 children standing like sentinels before a building ready to collapse. "What's your name?" Roman asked. "Ezra, and the others." Ezra glanced back without turning his body, protective to the bone. "That's Jude. He's my brother." He motioned toward the younger boy, who was watching Roman with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "And them." He looked to the girls. "Willa, Wren, and Winnie, our sisters, triplets." Roman studied their matching blonde curls, blue eyes, and dirty sneakers. They stood in a straight line, arms touching, like a small wall. Roman turned slightly, looking toward the machines parked nearby. Demo crews. Silent now. No one dared move. He looked back at Ezra. "You've been living here?" "Alone." Ezra nodded. "We take care of each other." Roman was silent. That sentence echoed in his chest longer than he expected. He thought of the reports, the spreadsheets, the legal documents signed and filed. The name on the payout authorization, Nathaniel Fenwick. A tidy deal. Nowhere in that process had anyone said, "There are still children in the house." Roman glanced at the structure behind them. It looked like it might fall over from a strong gust of wind. His voice dropped a tone. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "I know," Ezra said again. "But it's home." Roman stepped back. He pulled out his phone. Dialed. "Cole," he said flatly. "Call off the demolition. Indefinitely." A pause. "No. I don't care what it does to the schedule. Pull the crew." He ended the call and let the silence settle. Ezra didn't smile. He didn't thank him. He just stood taller, as if the simple act of being seen was worth more than permission. Roman turned toward his car, but the image of the 5 of them burned behind his eyes. That night, Roman sat in the back seat of his car for over an hour. Parked 3 blocks from the site, the engine was off. The air was still. He could hear the tick of the cooling metal beneath the hood. He wasn't thinking in numbers. He was thinking in faces. In particular, a pair of blue eyes that didn't blink once as he told her she couldn't stay in her home. Winnie, he remembered, the smallest of the triplets. She hadn't said a word, but her silence had screamed. Roman was not a man who lingered. He was decisive, famously so. But this wasn't about decisions. It was about responsibility. Not the kind that gets written in contracts, but the kind you feel when 5 children look up at you and don't ask for help because they've already learned not to. He looked out the window and whispered to himself, who failed them first? And then, almost without realizing it, was it me? The next morning, Roman Hale sat at his kitchen table, a French press of coffee cooling beside a bowl of oatmeal he hadn't touched. He was staring at a sticky note. On it were 5 names, written in neat, deliberate pen strokes. Ezra, Jude, Willa, Wren, Winnie. He had jotted them down from memory, right after he got home. The names wouldn't leave his mind. They looped in his head like a melody he didn't ask to hear soft, steady, unfinished. Across the room, the morning news buzzed from the wall screen. Economic forecasts, political chatter, a segment on the newest luxury skyscraper. One of his, in fact, he muted it. Roman leaned forward, elbows on the cold granite, hands clasped. There was no part of his life that had prepared him for yesterday. Not the Ivy League degrees, not the mergers, not the boardroom showdowns. And yet, 5 children had brought his world to a halt without even raising their voices. At 10 Roman called someone he hadn't spoken to in years, Alana Pierce, a former attorney from his corporate days now working family law. Smart, meticulous, the kind of person who didn't flinch easily. He explained the situation with clipped, professional clarity. Children, abandoned, condemned building, no clear legal guardian. Alana didn't interrupt. When he finished, there was a pause on the line. "Roman, are you asking for legal options?" she asked cautiously. "Or something else I need to know what happens to them," he replied. "If the state steps in." Another pause. Longer this time. Without a surviving legal guardian, they'd be placed into foster care. Sibling groups, especially large ones, are often split up. It's a numbers game. Housing availability, resources. He closed his eyes. And if someone wants to keep them together, they'd have to step forward. Fast. And mean it. That afternoon, Roman returned to Old Briarwood. The crew had cleared out. The yellow caution tape still fluttered in the wind. But the heavy machinery was gone. The house stood eerily quiet. He approached the porch slowly. He didn't knock. He waited. After a minute, the door creaked open. Ezra, still guarded. still steady. Roman raised a hand. Just me. Ezra didn't say anything. He stepped aside, opening the door wider. Roman entered for the first time. Inside, the house was dim, but not filthy. Old furniture lined the walls. The wallpaper peeled at the edges. A smell of rust and damp lingered in the air, but the floor had been swept. Dishes stacked neatly. Shoes lined up near the entrance. It was clear the kids had made order where they could. He followed Ezra into the living room. The triplets were sitting on a tattered blanket, drawing quietly with broken crayons. Jude sat curled in a corner with a book almost too big for his hands. They looked up when Roman entered. No one moved. No one ran. He knelt slightly, hands resting on his knees, voice softer now. "May I sit?" Ezra nodded once. Roman lowered himself onto the worn couch and looked around. "You've been doing all of this. Yourselves." Ezra shrugged, like the question didn't need an answer. Roman took a slow breath. "What happened to your mother?" Ezra hesitated. "She got real sick after the holidays. Couldn't breathe right. They took her in an ambulance. She hasn't come back. And your father? He left. Said he had to go get things sorted. Took the money from the papers. We haven't seen him since." Roman didn't respond right away. Jude spoke, suddenly and softly. He left the cereal open too. It went stale. It was such a small thing to say, so heartbreakingly normal. Roman felt his throat tighten. The girls didn't speak. But Wren looked up from her drawing and pointed to the page. It showed a house lopsided, colored with uneven strokes. In front of it were 5 stick figures holding hands. Roman leaned closer. "What's that next to it?" he asked gently. "Willa, the most serious-looking of the 3, whispered, "That's the bulldozer." He sat back, speechless. For years, Roman Hale had signed off on demolitions like clockwork. Old gave way to new. Simple math. But this wasn't math. This was memory. This was a family fighting to keep its story from being erased. He looked at Ezra. "I don't want to scare you," he said, "but this house, it's not safe. Structurally, legally." Ezra didn't argue. "I know." "Then why stay?" Ezra's eyes met his. "We'd rather be together in danger than split up somewhere safe." Roman Hale, builder of cities, speaker at conferences, architect of multi-million-dollar futures, had no answer for that. Just a tight nod, and a decision he wasn't ready to name yet. That evening, Roman Hale sat alone in his home office. The city sparkled outside his glass walls, a glittering sea of ambition. But he couldn't see it. Not really. His attention was fixed on the manila folder in front of him, the one his private investigator had delivered less than an hour ago. No executive summary, just facts. Cold, dry, factual pain. Nathaniel Fenwick. Signed over the property rights 41 days ago. Took the full payout. No forwarding address. No contact attempts. Bank account inactive since 2 weeks after the wire transfer. Gone. Roman flipped the page. Another record. Callie Fenwick. Admitted to Briarwood General Hospital January 7th. Diagnosed with severe autoimmune complications. Unconscious for 5 days. No listed emergency contact. Still under long-term care. No one had visited. Not even once. Roman leaned back in his chair, a quiet fury crawling just beneath his skin. He had always believed in clean lines, cause and effect. If something didn't work, you restructured it. If something was broken, you replaced it. But you couldn't restructure abandonment. You couldn't renovate grief. This wasn't just about 5 children in a house. It was about every person who saw them and did nothing. And maybe, In some way, it was about him too, because he hadn't seen them either. Not until it was almost too late. He opened a new screen on his desk monitor and typed into a search bar emergency guardianship process. Multiple minors, New York State. Legal jargon spilled across the screen. He scrolled, read, scanned, stopped, started again. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. Unaccompanied minors. CPS intake procedure. Foster separation likelihood. Trauma-informed placement. Sibling disruption rate 67%. Roman stared at that number. 67%. It stuck to his ribs like a stone. He looked back down at the children's names, still scribbled on the sticky note beside his keyboard. Ezra, Jude, Willa, Wren, Winnie. They weren't a statistic. They were a family. The next morning, Roman walked into the offices of Family First Legal Aid, a nonprofit tucked in a plain brick building between a payday loan store and a used bookstore. No marble, no valet, no glass elevators, just creaky floors and the faint smell of old paper. He didn't belong here, and he knew it. He sat across from Marla Jennings, a social worker with tired eyes and no patience for performances. "Mr. Hale," she said, scanning the intake file. "I've read the preliminary notes. 5 minors. No adult supervision. Mother hospitalized. Father absent. You're the property owner. Yes. You halted demolition. Yes. And now you're here because—" He looked her straight in the eye. "Because I want to make sure they don't fall through the cracks." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's not usually why people come here." Roman gave a soft, almost bitter smile. "I'm not usually the one who shows up at all." Marla studied him. Roman didn't fill the silence with anything else. He let the moment breathe. Finally, she leaned forward. "You know what happens when we intervene." "Right. Yes, 5 kids is a tough placement. The state doesn't split them on purpose, but it happens, especially when the youngest are under 6. And triplets." She shook her head gently. "No one's ready for that kind of commitment overnight." Roman's hands curled slightly on the table. What if someone as Marla hesitated? "Mr. Hale, are you planning to apply for temporary guardianship?" He didn't flinch. "I don't know what I'm planning yet, but I know this they've survived more than most adults could. Alone. And the idea that they'll be scattered now, it makes me physically sick." Marla tapped her pen slowly on the desk. "Do you have any experience with children? No? Do you have the resources? Yet do you know what you're asking for?" He looked down, then back at her. "No, but I know what I'm not willing to let happen." Outside, the wind tugged at the edges of his coat as he stepped back into the street. He didn't call his assistant, didn't check his phone. He just stood there for a moment, in a part of town that didn't wear suits, and let the cold sting his skin. He had walked into the day thinking he'd fill out a form. He left knowing he had drawn a line. And this time, it wasn't on blueprints. It was on his own conscience. Roman Hale had never returned to the same job site twice. But the next day, just past 4 p.m., his black sedan pulled up quietly again in front of the broken fence at the edge of Old Briarwood. This time, he wasn't in a suit, no tie, no polished shoes, just a soft gray sweater, clean jeans, and something even more unusual for him, grocery bags. Nothing fancy. Bread, peanut butter, apples, granola bars, milk, a small container of vitamins, children's toothpaste. He stood there for a few seconds, feeling absurd. Powerful men didn't do this show up uninvited with food and an apology they hadn't figured out how to say yet. But Roman wasn't powerful here. He was just a man who saw something he couldn't ignore. He knocked once, then waited. The door opened. Ezra again. Still wary, still calm. But this time, his eyes dropped to the bags in Roman's hands. "You came back." "I said I would," Roman replied quietly. Ezra didn't move, but he didn't close the door either. "Is it okay if I come in?" A short pause. Then, with the smallest nod, "Okay." Inside, not much had changed. But Roman noticed more now. The bucket near the kitchen door catching leaks from the ceiling. The towel tucked against the back window to block a draft. The chipped teacups arranged with care on the windowsill. In the living room, the triplets were playing a game with string and buttons. Jude sat nearby, nose deep in a book titled Galaxies and Stars for Curious Minds. Roman gently set the bags on the counter. Ezra hovered near him, not suspicious, not grateful either, just observant. Roman spoke gently. "This won't fix everything, but it might help tonight." Ezra nodded again. "Thank you." They sat in the kitchen, Roman on a creaky stool, Ezra across from him, small hands curled around a chipped mug of warm water. There was no coffee, no tea, just shared silence. Then, Roman asked, "What's your routine like here?" Ezra blinked, then began. "We get up at 6. Jude reads to the girls while I check the porch. Sometimes Miss Thelma from next door leaves food, but she doesn't knock. I think she's scared she'll get in trouble." He paused, then continued, "We eat if there's anything. Willa helps brush teeth. We take turns washing hair once a week. I use the laundry room at the back building. Sometimes the code still works." Roman listened, never interrupted. "Do the girls go to school?" "No. We don't want anyone to find out and split us up. Jude teaches them stuff from the books Mom used to read." Roman exhaled slowly. "How do you pay for anything?" Ezra's fingers tightened around his mug. "Mom hid money in a cookie tin. I only use a little at a time, mostly for soap or bandages." There was something in his voice, not pride, not fear, but a kind of quiet duty that shouldn't live inside a child. Roman leaned back. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, softly, "You're doing everything right. You've taken care of them." Ezra's eyes flicked up, confused by the compliment. "But it's not supposed to be your job." Ezra didn't respond, just looked away. A small hand tugged Roman's sleeve. It was Wren. Her blue eyes were wide and serious. "Are you going to take our house?" Roman looked down, and then into her face. The weight of that question pressed against every bone in his chest. He shook his head. "Not today," he said. "No one's taking anything today." They spent the next hour in a strange rhythm of small gestures. Roman helped reorganize the pantry, what little was in it. He fixed a loose hinge on the back door, read aloud a page of Jude's science book when asked. He didn't pry. He didn't offer too much. He just stayed, present. At one point, Willa drew a picture and handed it to him. It showed a tall man standing beside 5 stick-figure kids. Above them, in blocky letters, "We don't want to be alone." Roman folded it gently, tucked it into his coat pocket. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, Ezra walked him to the door. Roman paused before leaving. "What do you want me to do?" Ezra looked at his siblings, at the fading light on the floor, at the crooked frame of the home that wasn't holding much except the only family he had left. "We just want to stay together," he said softly, "and we don't want to go back to him." That night, Roman didn't sleep. Instead, he stood in the hallway of his penthouse apartment, staring at a room that had always been used for storage. It was full of things he hadn't touched in years. and for the first time since he was a boy, he wondered what it might sound like if it were filled with laughter. 2 days later, Roman Hale stood in front of a low, government-issued building that smelled faintly of dust, old linoleum, and institutional coffee. Child Protective Services. No glass walls here. No concierge. No private elevator humming silently to the top floor. Just buzzing fluorescent lights, torn carpet, and the sound of a crying toddler somewhere behind the reception desk. Roman straightened his jacket, not the tailored kind, but one borrowed from his closet that still smelled like distance and wealth, and stepped inside. The woman at the desk looked up, clearly surprised. He looked out of place, and he knew it. "Can I help you?" she asked. Roman nodded once. "I need to speak to someone about an urgent child welfare matter." The receptionist raised an eyebrow but didn't question him. Name Roman Hale. That name in most rooms opened doors. Here. It only got him a clipboard. 20 minutes later, he was sitting in a narrow windowless interview room with Marla Jennings, the same social worker he'd spoken to earlier in the week. She carried a thick file in her arms, her expression unreadable. "I pulled what I could find," she said, placing the file between them. "The system doesn't move quickly. Mr. Hale. But in this case, it barely moved at all." Roman leaned forward. Marla opened the file and began. No CPS reports filed. No school absences officially flagged. No medical alerts. No neighbors called in. Not even a wellness check. It's like these kids just disappeared. Roman frowned. How is that possible? Marla gave a dry, bitter laugh. Because people disappear all the time, especially when they don't scream loud enough. She flipped a page. Callie Fenwick, the mother, was listed as the sole guardian. No secondary contact. No living relatives we could verify. Her hospitalization should have triggered a child welfare alert, but the hospital flagged her as no dependents due to the intake paperwork. Roman narrowed his eyes. She has 5 children. Marla nodded, and no one asked. Roman sat back in his chair. "You're telling me the only reason we even know about them is because my demolition crew stopped?" "Yes. And if I hadn't gone down there myself, they'd probably be in 5 separate homes by now. If anyone even found them in time." Roman didn't speak. There was a pressure building in his chest, not anger exactly. More like a slow, suffocating grief for systems that miss the quietest cries. Marla softened her tone, just slightly. "You're not responsible for that. You know." "I am now," he said. She studied him for a long beat. "You've already requested temporary guardianship." "Not yet. I needed to understand what I was walking into." And now Roman didn't hesitate. "I'm stepping in." Marla leaned back, arms crossed. "You understand that this isn't simple, right? If you're not related, we'd need a court order for emergency custody. And after that, evaluations, home visits, interviews. You'd be opening your life up to a microscope." "I've already opened it to worse," Roman replied. "Shareholders, federal audits, press scandals. This isn't about protecting me." She smiled slightly. "Most people who come through here are trying to protect themselves. I'm not most people." "No," she said. "You're not." She closed the file and stood. "I'll start the paperwork for a welfare visit. If what you've said is true, and if the children are stable, safe, and willing to stay with you, we can schedule a temporary placement hearing by the end of the week." Roman stood too. "What do I do until then?" Marla paused at the door. "Be there." That's what most of them don't have. That afternoon, Roman returned to the house on Briarwood. This time, he wasn't carrying food, or files, or plans. He was just coming back. As he pulled up to the curb, the girls were sitting on the front steps. They were braiding pieces of thread into bracelets. Jude was nearby, holding a flashlight and inspecting a bug with intense curiosity. Ezra stood the moment Roman's car door opened. Protective. Always. Roman walked slowly up the path. A second car pulled up behind him. Marla Jennings stepped out. Ezra's entire body tensed. Roman knelt beside him, not touching just enough so their eyes met. "I told you I'd help," Roman said. "She's here to make sure no one tries to take your home again." Ezra didn't speak, but he didn't block the path either. It was enough. The visit was quiet, careful. Marla asked questions, observed, took notes. She watched the way Jude sat a little closer to Roman than before, how the girls each took turns showing her their drawings, how Ezra never fully left the doorway, and how Roman, the man with more real estate than he could count, sat on the floor and listened to a 5-year-old explain how she could tell Ren and Winnie apart just by how they held their crayons. When the visit ended, Marla pulled Roman aside. Her voice was quiet. "I'll fast-track the hearing." Roman nodded. "I'll be ready." The sky hung low that morning gray, unmoving, like the city itself was holding its breath. Roman Hale sat on a hard bench outside Family Courtroom 3B, a slim folder resting on his lap, his hands still. He was dressed simply. No luxury tie, no custom tailoring. His watch, the one he'd worn during billion-dollar negotiations, stayed in a drawer today. Across from him sat Marla Jennings, reviewing the final case file with quiet focus. Every so often, she'd glance at Roman not out of doubt, but as if trying to understand how a man who once demolished neighborhoods now asked to preserve one. At the far end of the hall sat the children, huddled on a bench like a patchwork quilt. The triplets wore matching yellow cardigans someone had donated last minute. Jude sat with his hands in his sleeves. Ezra kept his eyes forward sharp, alert, already reading the room like a soldier. They hadn't said much that morning, but when Roman arrived, Willa had slipped her small hand into his without asking. He hadn't let go since, at 9:02 p.m., the bailiff opened the doors. Case No. 4437. Fennec Miners. Petition for emergency guardianship. Please enter. The courtroom wasn't large or intimidating, but to Roman, it felt like the most important boardroom he'd ever entered. He sat at the front, beside Marlene Reyes, a family attorney recommended by Alana Pierce. Reyes was calm, efficient, and had the quiet intensity of someone who'd spent her life watching good people get overlooked by bad systems. Opposite them sat the state representative from CPS. At the back of the courtroom, the children sat in a row beside the temporary live-in caregiver Roman had hired 2 days prior, a warm, steady woman named Dara Lynn, who brought them books and let the girls choose their own breakfast cereal from the store shelf. Ezra sat like stone. Jude curled his fingers into the fabric of his jeans. The triplets swung their feet above the floor, their legs too short to reach. Roman exhaled slowly. The judge entered. She was tall, silver-haired, and unsentimental. Her name, Honorable Judge Evelyn Morrow. Her eyes swept the courtroom. Her voice, crisp. "We're here today to hear the petition for emergency guardianship of 5 minor children, Ezra, Jude, Willa, Ren, and Winnie Fenwick. Petition filed by Mr. Roman Hale, present in court." She turned her gaze to Roman. "You're not a relative. Mr. Hale. No, Your Honor. You're the CEO of the company that owns the building they were found living in." "Yes." Why are you petitioning for custody? Roman stood slowly. He'd written a statement. He didn't read it. Instead, he spoke from the truth that had lived in his chest ever since 5 children stood between him and a demolition crew, because no one else came for them. He said, his voice was steady, but softer than usual, because I almost signed their world away without knowing they existed. Because when I looked into their faces, I saw kids who had survived being forgotten and who were still standing. He paused. The judge waited. I can't change what happened to them. I can't erase their father leaving or their mother's illness or the way every system missed them. But I can show up and stay. There was a stillness in the room. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. She looked down at her papers, then back up. You believe you're qualified to care for 5 children under the age of 12. Roman didn't blink. No, not alone. That's why I've assembled a full care team, including a licensed child psychologist, a trauma-trained caregiver, medical support, and legal supervision. I'm not trying to be their savior. He continued, I'm trying to be their bridge between what happened to them and what comes next. Judge Morrow turned to Marla. Ms. Jennings, your report. Marla stood. Her voice was clear, direct, but there was a warmth beneath it, something new. I've conducted 2 welfare visits. The children are bonded, healthy. Despite conditions, they are emotionally connected to Mr. Hale. He doesn't interfere, but he shows up. He doesn't push, but they lean toward him. She looked at the judge. That's more than I see from most biological parents. The hearing continued. More procedural questions, background verifications, statutory language. Roman heard none of it. His eyes kept drifting to the children, to Jude, now holding Wren's hand, to Winnie, clutching the drawing she had made last night, to Ezra, who finally met Roman's gaze and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Roman felt something loosen inside his chest, a knot he hadn't known he'd tied. The judge returned 30 minutes later with her ruling, effective immediately. Mr. Roman Hale is granted temporary guardianship of the 5 Fenwick children, pending a full evaluation within 60 days. She tapped her gavel once, and just like that, they weren't invisible anymore. After the hearing, Roman took the kids to a small diner down the street. He didn't ask them what they wanted. He let them order chocolate milk, pancakes at noon, fries dipped in syrup. Nothing made sense. Everything was perfect. The girls talked for the first time in full sentences about crayons, cartoons, and which animal Roman would be if he were a zoo exhibit. Jude sat close beside him, opening a kid's menu and sliding the crayons across the table. You try, Jude said softly. Roman blinked, then laughed the kind of laugh that shook the dust off old walls inside your chest. He picked up the crayon and began to color. The first night in Roman's apartment was quieter than he expected. Not because the children were silent, they weren't, but because the home itself had never made room for noise before. Until now. The elevator ride up had been surreal. 5 small figures stood inside a space built for luxury executives' high ceilings, chrome fixtures, and backlit buttons. Winnie pressed every button below his floor before Ezra gently pulled her hand back. No, he whispered. We live way up. The door opened to Roman's penthouse, a space designed for solitude, not family. The floors gleamed. The furniture was modern and low-slung. The lighting dimmed itself automatically. A glass wall revealed the city skyline in full breathtaking, untouchable. The children stepped in as if they might break it just by breathing. Roman crouched beside them. This is your home now. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just yours. Wren looked up at him and asked quietly, "Can we touch stuff?" He nodded. "Please do." And just like that, the space stopped feeling sterile. The triplets chose their room first, the one with the most windows. They didn't fight. They didn't ask for anything. They just looked at the 3 small beds Roman had arranged that morning, complete with pink quilts, hand-picked from a local shop, and each quietly claimed a pillow. Jude took the room with the bookshelf. He placed all 4 of his books on the lowest shelf, lined up by size, then stood back like he was curating a museum. Ezra didn't say anything. He walked the hall once, then sat outside the girls' bedroom door. Roman watched him. "You don't want your own room?" he asked gently. Ezra shrugged. "They sleep better when someone's close." Roman didn't argue. He just set a blanket and pillow on the floor beside him and said, "Then so do I." The next morning, the apartment hummed with strange new music. Not jazz, not ambient instrumentals, but footsteps, toothbrushes clanking against the counter, spoons stirring cereal. A soft voice reading out loud from a dinosaur book in the living room. Roman stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee machine like it had betrayed him. He was used to silence, smooth routines. Now, it took him 5 minutes just to find clean bowls. He didn't care. He had never liked the silence. Anyway, he just learned to live with it. Throughout the week, small patterns emerged. Ezra checked every door twice before bed. Jude lined up his socks by color and kept a running list of space facts written on napkins. Willa hated having her hair brushed unless it was braided. Wren always ate the crust first. Winnie insisted on sleeping with a light on and whispered good night to the stars on the ceiling. Roman learned quickly. He learned that making grilled cheese for 5 kids meant burning at least 1 sandwich. That bedtime stories didn't have to be real. They just had to be from your head, as Willa demanded. And he learned that the smallest gestures earned the deepest trust. One night, as he tucked Winnie in, she reached up and touched his face. "You don't smell like hospitals," she said. Roman blinked. He didn't ask what she meant. He just kissed her forehead and said, "Good." He brought in Juliana Cho, a child psychologist recommended by Dara Lynn, to spend time with each child individually. Juliana was smart, gentle, patient. After her second visit, she sat with Roman in the kitchen, sipping tea, while the girls colored in the living room. "They're scared," she said softly, "but they're safe now, and they know it." Roman stared into his mug. "I keep thinking, I'll mess something up." "You will," Juliana said. "We all do." Then she smiled. "But they don't need perfect. They need present. You're doing that." That night, Roman stood in the hallway again, listening to the soft whir of the white noise machines he'd installed in each room. He touched the doorframe of the girls' room, heard Wren murmuring in her sleep. He turned toward Ezra's room, now fully claimed. Finally, and saw the boy asleep on top of the blanket, not under it, the light still on, a book open on his chest. Roman pulled the blanket over him and sat for a moment on the floor beside the bed. He didn't know if he was doing enough, but for the first time in years, he didn't want to be anywhere else. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, no markings. Just Roman Hale's name printed in tight. Familiar script on the front. He didn't open it right away. He placed it on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it might detonate. The children were at school their second week in new classrooms. Each drop-off got a little easier. The girls had started waving goodbye with both hands. Jude had a new favorite library. Ezra, though still watchful, had stopped flinching every time a door slammed shut. And now this. Roman poured a cup of coffee, let it sit untouched, then finally picked up the envelope and opened it. One page. A short, careful message, Roman. I've heard about the placement. I know you have them. I'd like to meet. I've been clean for 86 days. Please, I want to make things right. Nate, Nathaniel Fenwick, the man who signed the demolition release, the man who vanished after cashing the check, the man who left 5 children in a collapsing house with nothing but canned soup and flashlight batteries. Roman folded the letter once, then again, then tighter still. He didn't throw it away, but he didn't answer it either. Not yet. That evening, Roman brought the letter to Juliana Cho and Marla Jennings. They read it in silence. He still has legal parental rights, Marla said at last. They were never terminated. If he wants to pursue reunification, we can't legally ignore him. He wants a meeting, Roman said. He says he's sober, trying to make amends. Juliana raised an eyebrow. Do you believe him? Roman's jaw flexed. I don't know. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Marla said, if he petitions for visitation, it could complicate the custody process. But we can offer a monitored meeting, controlled environment, nothing unsupervised. Roman nodded, reluctantly. Schedule it. Then he added, but he doesn't speak to the children unless I say so. The meeting was held 3 days later in a neutral office space near the courthouse. No cameras, no press, just 4 chairs, a round table, and the hum of fluorescent lights. Roman arrived early. He wasn't sure what he expected to feel. Anger, maybe, but mostly. It was something else, something protective, primal, like every nerve in his body was preparing to shield the children, even if from memory itself. Nate arrived 15 minutes late. He looked thinner, hollow, his skin pale, eyes bloodshot but dry. The kind of man who once passed for charming in the right bar at the wrong hour. He smiled when he saw Roman. Roman didn't smile back. They sat. I appreciate this, Nate said first. Roman said nothing. I've been in treatment. Rehab. Out of state. I know what I did. I know I left. I know I don't deserve anything. But I wanted to say it. Out loud. He paused. They're okay. The kids. They're safe, Roman said coldly. For the first time in months. Nate's face twitched. I didn't know what to do. Callie was in the hospital. We were drowning in bills. I thought if I took the payout, I could disappear, start over, and eventually bring them with me. Roman's voice cut in, quiet but sharp. You didn't bring them anything. You left them. Nate nodded, slowly, shamefully. I thought I'd ruined them. But then I saw the photo in the paper. Ezra smiling. The triplets in matching jackets. Jude holding a book. He blinked rapidly. I just needed to know they weren't lost. That they could still be whole. Roman's knuckles whitened against the table's edge. They were whole, he said softly. Because they had each other. You were the one who left. Silence. Then Roman asked the only question he truly needed answered. Why now? Nate's voice cracked. Because I thought they'd forget me. But I couldn't forget them. Roman exhaled through his nose. He stood. Slowly. You don't get to decide how they heal. I'm not asking for them back, Nate said quickly. I just want to make amends. If not to them, then maybe through you. Roman paused at the door. Then stay gone, unless we ask otherwise. and he left. That night, on the apartment balcony, Roman sat with Ezra. They didn't talk for a while. Just watched the city lights blink on like stars behind glass. Then Ezra said, "It was him, wasn't it?" Roman didn't lie. "Yes." Ezra nodded, jaw tight. "He wants to come back. He said he's changed, that he wants to fix what he broke." Ezra's voice was low. "I don't want to hate him." Roman turned. "You don't have to. But you also don't have to forgive him just to make him feel better." Ezra looked away, then whispered something Roman nearly missed. "I just don't want him to take us away." Roman placed a hand on his shoulder. "He won't." Later that night, after bedtime stories and softly closed doors, Roman returned to the living room and found a drawing on the table. It showed 6 stick figures holding hands. In the corner, a figure stood alone, waving. Wren had written in bright purple crayon, "This is the man who left. We don't follow him." Roman folded it gently and kept it. The following weekend, Roman did something spontaneous. He borrowed a van from Dara, packed sandwiches, juice boxes, and 3 mismatched backpacks filled with sweaters, sketch pads, and emergency crackers. Then he loaded the children in and drove them 2 hours north of the city. It was a quiet farm nestled along the river, the kind with pick-your-own-fruit signs, a wooden goat pen, and dusty walking trails dotted with wildflowers. The kind of place where no one asked questions, where no one recognized his face, where no one expected anything except that he'd keep the kids from falling in the duck pond. Roman paid the entrance fee, then stood for a moment watching them run. For a while, he didn't follow. He just stood there, watching them be children. Wren chased a butterfly like it owed her money. Jude tried to name the shape of every cloud. The triplet squealed over a chicken with a crooked foot. Willa offered it her granola bar. And Ezra didn't run. He just walked beside Roman, silent, steady, eyes scanning the horizon. The protector, always. They wandered through an orchard lane, the trees heavy with ripe apples. The kids began collecting, their canvas bags dragging on the dirt as they raced to find the reddest ones. Roman and Ezra stayed a few steps behind. "You've never taken a day off?" "Have you?" Ezra asked, not looking up. Roman smiled faintly. "I don't think I knew how." "A beat." "You're learning," Ezra said. "We noticed." Roman glanced at him. Ezra shrugged. "The girls talk a lot." Roman chuckled under his breath. A moment passed. The leaves rustled in the breeze. A dog barked far off. Then Ezra stopped walking. His voice was quieter than Roman had ever heard it. "If they ask us in court again," he began, eyes on the ground. Roman slowed. "If they ask where we want to live," he hesitated. Roman waited. Ezra looked up. Finally, "Can we stay with you?" Roman didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't know, but because he felt the answer in his bones. And it scared him. How simple it had become. He crouched so they were eye level. He didn't look down. He looked into Ezra's face, the cautious hope, the stubborn calm. He reached out not to hug, just to rest a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "If all of you want that," Roman said softly, "then yes. I want you to stay with me. Forever." Ezra's shoulders didn't drop. He didn't smile wide. But Roman saw it, the flicker of relief behind his eyes, like a storm cloud finally believing it didn't have to rain. That evening, back in the city, Roman sat alone at his desk. The file lay open in front of him. Inside, school records, medical evaluations, drawings the triplets had given him, notes from Juliana, approval letters from Dara, and Marla's latest recommendation. All signs were green. Roman added one more document, a petition for full legal custody. He signed it without ceremony, without fanfare. And for the first time, his signature didn't feel like the end of a transaction. It felt like the beginning of a promise. The next morning, Marla confirmed the court date could be moved up. Expedite approved. Nate Fenwick had signed the necessary waivers formally relinquishing parental rights. Roman didn't ask to see the letter. He didn't need it. That chapter wasn't his to finish. What mattered now was the chapter ahead. That night, Jude came into Roman's room holding his book and a question. "Can I read to you tonight?" Roman blinked. "Usually I'm the one reading." Jude shrugged. "You look tired." Roman smiled and listened as a 9-year-old boy read about stars, about galaxies too wide for the mind to hold, and about light that never dies even when it's far, far away. The courtroom was brighter this time. Maybe it was the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Maybe it was the way the children walked in, not huddled, but together. Willa wore her new blue dress. Wren carried a small stuffed fox in one hand and a folder of her artwork in the other. Winnie wore 2 different shoes and insisted it was intentional. Jude had a tiny notebook tucked into his jacket pocket labeled Big Questions. Ezra walked in with his head held high, one hand resting on Willa's shoulder and the other gripping Roman's jacket sleeve for just a moment before letting go. Roman sat at the front again. No nerves this time. Just breath. Just presence. Across the room, Judge Evelyn Morrow shuffled papers. She'd seen thousands of families pass through this room. Most fractured, some fixed, but very few rebuilt from the ground up. Petitioner is requesting full legal custody of the minors listed on record, the judge said, eyes flicking over the file. Biological father, Nathaniel Fenwick, has signed all necessary waivers. Mother, Callie Fenwick, remains under full-time medical care. She looked up. "Mr. Hale, do you understand the responsibilities this entails?" Roman nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She tilted her head. "No legal obligation has required you to be here. You came voluntarily." Why, Roman stood slowly. He didn't read from a statement. He hadn't prepared one. But he had the answer. "Because they chose me," he said, "and I chose them." He paused, turning slightly to look at the children. 5 faces he now knew better than he knew most of his colleagues. "I came into their lives to tear something down. I stayed to build something better. Not perfect, but real. They've given me more than I could ever repay. I'm not asking to replace what they lost. I'm offering to protect what they still have." His voice didn't waver, but it softened. "I want to be their home." Silence filled the courtroom. The judge stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to Marla. "Social services recommendation." Marla stood. "Unanimous support," she said. "The children are safe, stable, and thriving under Mr. Hale's care. We recommend permanent placement." The judge nodded once. Then she signed the final form. The sound of her gavel was quiet. "Final, effective immediately. Full legal custody is granted to Mr. Roman Hale for Ezra, Jude, Willa, Wren, and Winnie Fenwick." The room didn't erupt. There was no dramatic music, no swelling soundtrack, just a deep exhale from Roman, a slow blink from Ezra, a sudden, soft cheer from Wren, who pumped her fist in the air and said, "We're staying." Winnie clapped. Jude smiled without hiding it. And Willa whispered, "Does that mean this is really real?" Now Roman knelt beside her. "It was always real," he said. "This just made it permanent." That evening, they went back to the same diner from the emergency hearing. The same waitress greeted them eyes wide when she saw the group. "I remember you," she said. "You were here before, with the big order and the little crayons." Wren beamed. "We have the same people, but now we belong to each other." The waitress blinked hard, then smiled. "Would you like a special dessert?" Winnie grinned. "Cake?" "But it has to say something." "What should it say?" Roman looked at them. Ezra shrugged. "Something true." So the cake came out with white frosting, crooked letters, and a message written by Willa and Wren, together family. That night, back at the apartment, Roman stood in the hallway again. Same white walls, same quiet hum of the city outside. But everything had changed. Laughter spilled from the girls' room. Jude read aloud from his Big Questions notebook. Ezra wandered through the hallway once, checked each door, and gave Roman a silent nod before heading to bed. It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic. It was peace. Roman Hale had closed billion-dollar deals, built towers that reached the sky. But tonight, he felt taller than any building he'd ever constructed, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't building something for investors. He was building it for them, and that made all the difference. 3 months passed. The season turned. City parks became seas of golden leaves. Wool hats and mismatched gloves reappeared. The triplets began arguing over whose breath made the biggest cloud in the cold. Jude asked if clouds could technically be captured in jars. Ezra, now 12, helped Roman fix a leaking pipe under the bathroom sink, then wrote a chore chart without being asked. Their life had rhythm now. Not routine that would never fully exist with 5 kids in one home, but rhythm. Like jazz, improvised, messy, but deeply alive. One Friday afternoon, Roman left work early. His assistant raised an eyebrow. "You have a shareholder call in an hour." Roman grabbed his coat. "They'll wait." The kids were performing in a school showcase. Wren was reciting a poem she wrote called "Things I Know for Sure." Jude was doing a science demo about static electricity. Willa and Winnie had choreographed a dance to a song from a cartoon Roman had never heard of, and Ezra had volunteered to be the MC. The same boy who once wouldn't speak to a stranger without standing behind his siblings now stood in front of a gym full of parents with a microphone in hand, introducing each act with dry humor and calm clarity. Roman stood in the back. He didn't film. He just watched, with every part of himself. Afterward, they walked home in the cold, Wren on his shoulders, Jude retelling every single act, Winnie humming the song from her dance while holding Roman's hand. At the front door, Ezra paused. He looked up at Roman and said, "You didn't miss a thing." Roman smiled. "Neither did you." That night, after the kids were asleep, Roman sat at the dining table, the same table where he had once spread out architectural plans, where he'd once eaten alone, where silence had echoed louder than footsteps. He was writing a letter to Callie. She hadn't woken up yet. The doctors weren't hopeful, but Roman still wrote. He didn't sugarcoat anything, didn't pretend to be something he wasn't, but he told her the truth, that her children were safe, that they laughed now, that Ezra still slept with one eye open but sometimes laughed out loud. 2, that Jude had started a blog for science facts, that the triplets knew how to make pancakes in chaos, that their family wasn't perfect, but it was real, and most of all, that he stayed. The next morning, Roman woke early and stood by the window with a mug of coffee. Ezra joined him a few minutes later, wordless as ever in the morning, just standing beside him. Below, the city pulsed to life. So many stories in motion, so many people coming and going. Roman used to find peace in that distance, But now peace was in the small things. The soft thud of socks on tile, Wren's morning singing in the bathroom, the smell of toast from the kitchen, the fact that someone else was home besides him. He glanced at Ezra and asked quietly, "What do you think we'll build next?" Ezra shrugged, then answered, "Whatever we want." And that was the story. Not of a man who saved anyone, but of a man who didn't walk away. Of a man who came to demolish a building and ended up saving a family. Because sometimes the biggest change doesn't come from tearing things down. It comes from choosing to stay. They say family is blood, but sometimes family is the man who stayed when no one else did, who gave up boardrooms for bedtime stories, who chose pancakes and hand-drawn crayon maps over profits and power. Roman Hale didn't just change the lives of 5 abandoned children. They changed his. And in a world where so many walk away, he reminded us what it means to show up, to stand against a system that failed them, to prove that love the real kind isn't loud, it's steady, it's patient, and it never needs a contract. But this story also asks us to look deeper. Why were these children left behind in the first place? How many others are still waiting for someone to see them, to choose them? And why is it still so easy to dismiss those who seem forgotten? Let this be a reminder. Every life matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is simply staying. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal the human heart one chapter at a time. We'll see you in the next video.